Hey everybody, I'm going to talk about drafting content in this video. When we draft content for instructions, we know that instructions should include a title, an introduction, the required steps, and then a conclusion. So I'm going to go through each of these briefly, give you a little more information on them. The title should be clear and limiting. It shouldn't say anything more or less than is needed. So we have a couple examples here. Laptop computer maintenance, instructions for cleaning your laptop's DVD drive, and instructions for cleaning your Dell Latitude 7200's DVD drive. Which one of these do you think is most useful? Well, it probably depends on what the instructions are. The first one, laptop computer, I would say is not really ever going to be very helpful. That seems to me to say less than is needed in just about any case. Laptop computer maintenance could be a decent title for a manual that's going to describe general maintenance of a laptop. But the more detailed ones, bullets 3 and 4, really start to give us a limited title. It really clearly describes what it is these instructions are going to be about. Now, in an introduction, we need to talk about we need to define what we're going to be doing, talk about the benefits and the purpose of the procedure. We can give a sense to our reader who the intended audience of these instructions is, what prior skills or knowledge they need. We'll give a brief overall description of the procedure, tell them what materials they need, give them any definitions that they might need, certainly outline warnings, and then even list the major steps. So on the right here, I have an example of what that could look like, and I'll let you pause the video and take a look at it, but I won't read it here. When we talk about the required steps, we want to think about overall kind of major steps and then any nested or sub-steps that might be required to accomplish those major steps. So you can think of it outlined this way. We have our first major step. We can define that step and talk about what its purpose is, and then we can list out these sub-steps. So here's an example. If we're talking about doing some basic plumbing maintenance in a house, the first thing we can tell our reader is to shut off the water supply. We tell them why. Before you can work on your plumbing, you must turn off the water supply at its source, and then we give them these sub-steps. Look under the sink, turn the valve clockwise, turn the handle of the faucet. And I've also got in here a little note to the reader, and notice that it's separated a little bit with some white space, and it's italicized, so it looks a little visually distinct from the rest of these steps. When we conclude, we want to review what the major steps were if our process is particularly complex. We want to describe the results of the procedure and then offer troubleshooting for follow-up information. So in our conclusion on the right here, you can see we say, after you've replaced the washer, again, this is like a little plumbing washer, and turned the water back on, you can test your repair. Turn on the water at the faucet and let it run for a few seconds. After you turn it off, no water should drip out, but if it continues to drip, you may have a bigger problem and you'll need to call a professional. So some best practices, you want to use informative headings. Remember that your major steps will make up the bulk of your headings, and then you'll also have some sub-steps and some notes and some warnings that might require some headings too. Arrange step in numbered lists and separate each step visually. White space is your friend in technical documents. You don't want them compressed and very dense, because that's going to discourage readers from actually reading them. You can double space to indicate a new paragraph rather than indenting. This is not a 5-paragraph essay that you wrote in high school. Make warnings, cautions, danger notices really visible. Use color, bold, italics, whatever you can to really draw people's eye. Notice in the example here that we have this large warning icon next to this caution. Separate additional information from the actual step. Again, we have this note here that's separated visually from the actual step 1.1. And then make visual and verbal information redundant. So here's an example. Every time we have a figure, an image, or something that accompanies a step, we need to label that figure. So in this case, figure 1, loop for slipknot. And then in the step, where this figure applies, we need to reference the figure. So make a loop with your yarn, see figure 1. This is a real pet peeve of mine personally, when we just have these figures that are in a text that are labeled and they look really nice, but in the actual part of the document that I'm supposed to read, I don't see any references to them. You always need to have both of those things. You want to keep the step and the visual close together. So place them side by side if you can. And if you can, make all the graphics the same size, the same dimensions for consistency. It'll make your instructions look really, really nice. And then consider using tables to help you do this, to keep the text and the image side by side. Here's an example of what I mean. And once you've done this, you can turn off those borders so that it doesn't look like a table. It looks just like a nicely designed set of instructions. And then finally, just try to keep it as simple as you can. You don't want to overwhelm your readers with too much information. Hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions.